All right, good morning. It's a wintry weather event here in the Buffalo area. Schools are closed. I don't know about stores, probably, but the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is not closed. We are back here for episode 100 something. On Tuesday, January 20th, 2026, I'm your host, Chris Baker. You can find me on X at Sabres Prospects, and with me, the busy man here in the Sabres sphere. That is your Sabres beat writer for The Athletic. His name is Matthew Fairburn. You can find all of Matthew's work at theathletic.com/Sabres. Get over there, get a subscription. If no one was nice enough to stuff one in your stocking, or if you've been a slacker or not having one for the past couple of years, you're missing out on the most in-depth, most comprehensive sports coverage that exists out there. If you're watching this on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to the Sabres Prospects YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when a new show drops. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And you could please leave a 5-star review. Sabres got back to work over the weekend and again on Monday, dropping a pair of afternoon games, Matthew Fairburn. A 5-4 overtime loss on home ice to the Minnesota Wild. Kind of an exciting game, I would say. And then on Monday afternoon, MLK Day matinee, the Sabres began a 5-game stretch of road games with a 2-1 loss in Carolina. So we've seen some changes in the lineup, players coming in and out with what might be some short-term injuries. But I guess let's just talk at a high level about these two games. We've mentioned a lot about this compressed schedule, and points are obviously crucial here for the Sabres in the stretch leading up to the Olympic break, but really right up until the end of the regular season, every point is going to matter. And the Sabres just walked away capturing one of a possible 4.
Yeah, one of a possible 4 after getting 4 of a possible 4 against the most important opponents in this last 4-game block. Not to say they couldn't have used these ones as well, but I think that there's going to be some lulls in their play. There's going to be some games where they're not as sharp. I thought Saturday was one of those games. They were not quite where they had been previously. Monday, I thought they sort of bounced back a little bit, but ran into a really hot goalie in Carolina, and Brandon Bussey, who's won now 18 of his first 22 starts. Funny enough, was claimed on waivers one day before the Sabres claimed Colton Ellis. So,
Matt, you remember when that happened? There was someone on the phone with you talking about Brandon Bussey.
He'd always been sort of the next one in Boston that he'd been talked about. It just never quite materialized for him. He's 27 years old.
He's been a free player all along the way. I mean, coming out of Western Michigan, big goalie, looked good. When he was in college, he was just always right there, just waiting for an opportunity. You can't pass up free players, and he's been in some pretty good organizations now, hasn't he?
Yeah, the funny thing is he ended up in Florida over the summer, and they're the ones who waived him. So he was available multiple times this off season. For, I think, obvious reasons, it was tough for him to break through at a certain time in Boston when the net was so crowded. But what a game he had, and what a run he's on. Will be interesting to see if he can be a difference maker in the playoffs. But he definitely stole some points from the Sabres, and now I guess the challenge becomes, we've talked about just getting to the break, right? Getting to that Olympic break and trying to get healthy, because Josh Norris is week to week-ish. He could be back by the end of the week. It could extend into next week. Been out since last Wednesday, since he got cross-checked in the ribs. And so probably going to be tough to put an exact timetable on that. And it's probably going to be difficult for him to feel 100% until he gets to shut it down at the Olympic break. I think the same might be true for Michael Kesselring, who I had a long conversation with him last week before he returned to the lineup, and he did not play on Monday against Carolina. He did play on Saturday against Minnesota. got in a fight. He was mixing it up, ended up with his nose all cut up later in the game. So pretty eventful return for him. But he did not play on Monday, and it sounds like he tweaked the ankle, but that he should be, potentially available to play against Nashville. It might just be a matter of, limiting the back to backs and things like that. But when we talked last week, he mentioned that, the battles and stuff like that are going to be, a little bit of a pain management thing, probably until the break when he's able to shut it down and get it back to 100% or closer to 100%. So this guy is going to be, it's a high ankle sprain. He's just going to be fighting it for a while. And so those are two pretty big injuries for this team. And I think you're seeing the effect that they're having on the lineup, in these close games where they're dropping points.
Let's stay on Kesselring for a second. So, do we know when in that game he may have tweaked that ankle again? Because my thought, or I'm hoping anyways, with the battles, in the corners he's speaking about, but a fight is also a battle. And I understand that he wants to make an impression. It wasn't from the fight, was it? Do we know? Do
Don't
we
know for
know?
sure. Don't know for sure. It could have been. Um, don't know for sure. So I'm not going to say that it was. On the fight though, I I don't blame Kesselring too much there because, he was all over Quinn Hughes there for
Mhm.
a little while. And then Foligno wanted to fight him. I think Kesselring knows he's entering a mismatch when Foligno wants to fight, but he's simply not backing down. It wasn't a reckless
Mhm.
fight. He wasn't going out looking for a fight. It was a matter of, okay, fair enough. I was mugging your best player, and now I've got to answer for it. Do you want him fighting in his first game back from injury? Probably not. But
That's my point. It's admirable. I get where that's what I mean. I get that he wants to make an impression and he's got a lot of, he's ready to step up and like just make everyone on the team know that he's there and ready to go. But if it happened during that fight, obviously hindsight's 2020. I would maybe question his decision making a little bit in the moment. It's again
no, it's
hindsight's
fair.
2020.
I mean, it's not
I
even
just
hindsight. Your first game back from a high ankle sprain, it'd be pretty easy to pass on a fight. I wonder if it would be easier to pass on a fight if it was a less,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, Marcus Foligno is one of like the most honorable players in the league. I feel like. I mean, he's
Mhm.
just one of those guys
One of
that.
the toughest too.
Well, he's one of the toughest, but
Yeah.
he's also just one of those guys that I feel like has a lot of respect. And so it's like if he's asking you to go and you're
Yeah.
Kesselring, and I'm sure he was not going into that game looking for a fight. But I will say, from our conversation last week, he was pretty honest about it's clear he's wearing this, right? This
Mhm.
pressure of being injured. And, this is not a player like Josh Norris who had an injury history coming in. This is new to him. And particularly the high ankle sprain is a tough one to deal with. It's always going to be something that lingers on you. And especially as a defenseman, all those battles that you get into in front of the net or in the corners, like that's just going to put stress on that injury. He actually had, a conversation with a few of the defensemen, a few of the leaders, kind of pulled guys aside to just let them know at some point when he was injured, just to let them know, like, hey, I'm give me a little bit of time and I'm going to be able to make an impact here. I just need to get this thing right. And seemed like that helped him feel a little less of that pressure. He sits, if not right next to Matthias Sam, I think it's right next to Matthias Samuelson in the locker room, and those two have spoken. Obviously, Samuelson knows what he's going through and has tried to let him know that you know he's going to be a big part of this team. So it's been a lot for him, I think, to deal with,
Yeah.
and I understand the fan frustration of wanting to see what this guy can do. It's the particular injuries he's dealing with. He made a good point though that it's good practice for the playoffs is the way he put it. He's like, this is everybody's going to be playing hurt
Everyone's playing
at
with
that time of
something.
year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
He's like, learning to battle through it, learning to get healthy or play when you're not quite healthy is a good skill to have, but I think they'd rather manage it, especially they're getting pretty close to that break now. That should allow it enough time to fully heal, but you never know with the ankle sprain. And I mean, even what Norris is dealing with, you hope that can get to 100%, but it feels like he'll be one hit away if it's ribs from it acting up on him again.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess back to Kesselring, I like fighting in hockey. I didn't love that one given the spot. Um, I guess I just hope that it wasn't a tweak because that is a battle, like I said. And it was already questionable, really, whether they should have thrust him back into the lineup. I know why they did it, and I get it. I don't know. I guess we'll see where it goes with Kesselring because he did not play in the Carolina game after that. So, um,
Well, and to your
there's a
point, he in that conversation we had, he mentioned, the battles are going to be what they are. And to me, that was an indication that it's still not 100%. And again, that injury may not ever be quite 100% until you get the necessary
mhm,
time. But if you're still feeling a little certain way about getting into those 50-50s or, laying the big hits, it's an interesting thing about that injury. I almost assumed that skating would be a bigger issue because of the way he likes to push the play and carry the puck into the offensive zone. But it does make sense that the leverage that you're trying to
mhm.
use that ankle with, I mean, that's how he hurt it both times. One at first on a big hit and then re-injured it on another hit in the Dallas game, I believe. So that's one that might be what it is for a little while. And thought he played okay in his game that he was back, but he's still obviously not quite himself. And anytime you're jumping into your first game with that much time off, you're going to have some puck play that's a little iffy. But it's still, I mean, we've talked about it on the last few shows, but that Metza Bryson thing is, um, it's not really sustainable to give those guys, 7 to 10 minutes of ice time a night and think that the other four are going to be able to hold up.
And when you spend 5 minutes in the box and you're already maybe at 80, 85% and you only played 10 minutes and 16 seconds, how much are you really helping the
He
team?
actually
You
spent 9 minutes in the box,
9 minutes. Yeah,
5 for
that's true.
fighting. They had
Yeah,
the 2-minute, I guess it was unsportsmanlike they got called for because they tried to fight, and then
that's right.
the
Yep.
Sabres scored. So they get the 2 minutes, they get out of the box, and they, 5 for fighting, and then Kesselring got another penalty, later in the game. I think it was a hooking penalty or a holding penalty. So, um, yeah, 9 minutes in the box, a little 10 and change on the ice. They were giving him some shifts late in the game, so I was kind of trying to monitor that, like where, how are
Mhm.
they feeling about him? How many shifts is he getting in the third period? And he did get an important shift with maybe might have been the second to last defensive shift before overtime. Didn't play in overtime, but yeah, the penalty kill was busy during that game, but he didn't log a ton of the ice time because they were killing off his penalties a few of the times. So to your point, if you're only given that much ice time, you're not taking the load off. Before he was in the 15 to 17-minute range. He hasn't hit 20 minutes yet
Yeah.
for this team. So it is a fortunate thing for him. And I don't get the sense that it's taken he's joked about it where, oh, Josh Doan's playing so well that it's taking the pressure off me. It almost feels like it's putting more pressure on him in
Mhm.
some ways. In theory, it should take the pressure off him in the sense that the trade looks like a win, like straight up,
Yeah.
Paterka for Doan. But I think it does put a different pressure on him too. He sees the love that Doan's getting from the fan base. He sees, you know, the impact he's making and how that feels. And he wants a taste of that. I mean, he feels like he can be a big piece of this. And I think he will down the stretch. I just question whether he will in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and look, as a team, it's not how you start, it's how you finish, and it's gonna be the same thing for Kesselring. If he can get through this Olympic break, get healthy, come back, then, Lindy just has another defenseman that he can trust a little bit more than maybe that Metza-Bryson duo there that still is not playing big minutes. I mean, Metza yesterday, 8:41, Bryson, 8 minutes. Um, that's a clear indicator, especially if they put Kesselring in on Saturday. I don't know, we'll call it 80%. Lindy's basically saying, "I'll take a Kesselring at 80% over a Bryson at 100%, and break up his left, right, left, right, left, right desires as well in doing so." So, um, yeah, just something to monitor. I mean, the injury to Josh Norris is obviously, I think, I know it's week to week. So going back to the Philly game last week, takes a cross check and has not been on the ice since then, at least in a game. And that's becoming, I think, an official concern now. The injury troubles of Josh Norris were always a concern, and we've seen his impact on this team. The Sabres' rise up through the month of December directly correlates to Norris coming back in the lineup, probably just as much as maybe the change in the front office. And they're back in the same spot now with Norris watching from the press box in these games. Um, he went to IR with Alex Lyon. It looks like Alex Lyon, by the way, is set to return. So just to kind of
Yeah, he backed up on Monday against Carolina,
put
and
a yeah.
Lindy said he will play at some point this week. So good news on that front. Somebody that they definitely needed back after the way Colton Ellis has played. I would say you want Lyon back in, and they now have the room, I guess, to with Norris going on IR to make that the three goalie thing. They've
Mhm.
basically been able to have it because they have an injury at any given time. But the
Constant shell
Norris,
game. Yeah.
yeah, the Norris thing, to your point, like now it's becoming a real thing again.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
we're left to piece things together a little bit usually until, I mean, it's one of the things I appreciate about Kesselring is sort of his honesty. And I don't think his honesty is a detriment to his recovery. I understand why guys like to keep it close to the vest, but him just kind of coming out and being like, "Yeah, I hurt my knee earlier in the year and got this high ankle thing." It's like, okay, now I can provide some context and put together what this might look like. Earlier in the year, if you remember, Lindy Ruff said on Josh Norris's injury that kept him out, whatever it was, 6 weeks
Mhm.
ish, 6 to 8 weeks. He said it's not the same injury as last year, but it's related. And last year was an oblique. And so there's a limited number of things that are related to an oblique, but ribs would be one of them.
Yeah.
And if a rib injury were to keep you out for as long as Norris was out earlier in the year, that's a pretty significant one, right? And that, and then he was cross-checked in the ribs last week. And so, if you draw the line between the two injuries, it is possible. And TNT said on the broadcast yesterday, this may have been a slip on their part. This may have been something that was um, based in fact, but they did say it was a re-injury of the upper body injury he had earlier in the season. So whether they misspoke or whether they let something slip from a pregame chat or whatever, not sure. But
Hmm.
I think you can draw the line between the two potentially.
I think so. Yeah.
Either way, it's probably ribs now. Whether it was or not early in the year, it's probably ribs now because that's where he was hit. And that's another one that, you know, there's going to be some pain management involved in that, but there's also going to be some risk of re-aggravation and re-injury, I would think. Until probably that Olympic break. So it feels like they're white knuckling things a little bit. And it does put some attention on Jarmo Kekalainen as we see trade activity pick up around the league. This team could probably use a reinforcement or two.
Mhm.
And you've got 2 to 3 really big pieces out of your lineup if you count Connor Timmons, which I think I would, considering what his absence has done to the minute distribution on the blue line. So these three pieces should all be available to you down the stretch, but it doesn't change the fact that you could use. I think you could use one more top nine forward, and I think you could use one more defenseman
Mhm.
at the least. And this team, I think, has reached a point, considering how many games there are between now and the trade deadline, it's not a lot because they take that long break. They're going to be in it at the deadline. I'm pretty confident in saying, unless they totally fall off. So it should be buy mode. And the sooner the better, considering the injuries are happening right now. You know, they're banged up now and could use the help now. And these points are going to matter just as much as the ones coming out of the Olympic break are going to matter. So I think the sooner the better.
Yeah, and so with that said, I mean, you're running low on call-ups now too. You already have Ostlund up here; he's doing all right. You still have Rosane stashed down in Rochester when it comes to the forwards, but these aren't the answers that you're looking for. Consta Helenius comes up, makes his NHL debut. Um, Good to get him some exposure in a very tough game. I think that that's the type of opponent and the environment that was actually proper to throw him into because that's a style of game that he can play. I thought he held up well. I don't want to judge that line's performance because it didn't look pretty if you look at the underlying numbers for them out there, but it didn't really look pretty for any line yesterday. I mean, they only had 18 shots on goal. Second opportunities are hard. That's the type of game, by the way, where you have to commit to the shot. Whenever you get a lane, you have to commit to getting the puck on net and just crash and get ugly goals. We've seen this team, like you go back to the Philly game. I mean, they were very efficient on sub 20 shots on goal. You're not going to get that up. You're not going to get second chances against a Carolina team. But to bring it back to Hellenius, I thought that he looked okay. But again, a guy like that's not going to be the answer. If you're trying to make the Stanley Cup playoffs, you're just not. So the reinforcements, I get you when you say top nine. I'm looking for some experienced guys. Yeah, I still think that you could use a little, even if it's a second PP guy, but primarily it'd be nice to get a first PP type of caliber player. And at this point, I don't even, with Norris is the question marks there, a guy that can play center would be nice.
Be great.
But I'm not going to be position picky.
No, I feel to your point.
I'm putting experience and some scoring pop regardless of where it comes in that top nine.
And I say top nine. That's not to say, a guy that can just play third line. I'm thinking scoring, right? I'm thinking
exactly.
Experienced offensive pop because they've balanced those three lines out to where some nights, the line that's listed as the third line, looks like the first line in some ways. It is an interesting conversation to have about center because coming into the year, it was supposed to be Kulik and Norris as your 1-2 centers. And so when I did my midseason, report on various superlatives, I put Tage Thompson as MVP, and part of that, he's played really well this year, I think, on the whole. But a big piece of that is if he hadn't assumed those number one center responsibilities, this team would have been in real trouble. And this team would be in real trouble right now as far as their center depth. And the fact that he has become that player and has his moments still defensively, but has been a lot better and takes over games, not all the time, but certainly occasionally. And yesterday almost did again with some of the chances he had. That's been a big deal for them. But I think getting some stability down the middle is still something they need to be thinking about. Like to your point, finding a guy that plays center or plays on the top power play, right? One or the other, because the consistency issues on the top power play are still a problem. And if you're going to be without Norris at times, if you're going to sort of budget to be without him at times, the options right now are Osland. You know, yesterday there was a pronunciation change to Hellenius. Did you notice that? They were calling him Hellenus. And
Yeah,
I think that was an official change potentially. So I don't know. We'll go with Hellenus for now, unless it.
every Finnish player when they come to North America, it's a pretty common name in Finland. They've always been Hellenius, not Hellenus.
It's
It's
tricky.
and
We're
I
gonna
think
have to.
sometimes when you hear it, yeah, it's but he's always been Hellenius.
So who
Always.
knows?
So, but I
But
know
he
when he came over, he says it, but it's the way that he says it out of his mouth, Hellenus.
right.
And I think that we pick up on that.
It's
There
always
are
tricky.
people in, yeah, it's just
It's
he's
always
going to be
tricky.
Hellenius to me. I don't.
Well, he can play a little bit of center. He took more faceoffs yesterday than Osland did.
Yeah.
But we've also talked about maybe integrating him into the league on the wing makes some sense. So center is definitely something they should we bat around some names? Are we in that? I feel like we're getting pretty close here to the deadline, and
Yeah.
there is a new there was a new letter. You've seen this letter, I'm sure. That Chris Drury. No wonder he
Oh yeah,
did
I saw
not
that. Yeah.
make an appearance at 0506 reunion night. He had some homework apparently with this
Mhm.
essay he put out on Friday, I think it was,
He
about
definitely runs his business in a unconventional way, or at least what we're used to seeing from an NHL general manager. But yeah, go ahead.
he wrote a letter basically saying they're open for business, that there was going to be a retool. I get so amused in the NHL in particular about how careful these front office types are about the words they use that all basically mean we're going to suck for a little while.
Mhm.
Like you look at Vancouver and the way they're tap dancing around the rebuild. It's going to be a hybrid retool on the fly, or it's going to be, they use all sorts of uh, different phrases to basically say we suck, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we need to make some trades. We're not going to win this year, right? And maybe not next year either. But it is always amusing to me. And the teams that don't do that, look at Washington, right? They just went and did it, right? They just went and rebuilt their team on the fly without a letter and without or maybe I don't know. Maybe they sent out a letter that year. They were trading Orlov and all those guys, but they just went out and did it. They handled their
Yeah.
business and got back to where they needed to get. But Drury put it out there, right? The Rangers they're open for business. And the Rangers have been a team I feel like we've sort of circled that roster for a while and tried to find the pieces that make sense. And I think it's a tricky trade fit in some ways for the Sabres, but there's a lot of names there. I don't think
Yeah.
we've discussed Panarin on this show, but he's going to be the first one people will ask about. History with Jarmo Kekalainen in Columbus, full no
Mhm.
movement clause, 34-year-old pending UFA. Probably looking at, his cap hits are like 11 million, so they're going to have New York eat some of that.
You're looking at 5.5 or ish that you're going to have to take on if they eat half. Yeah.
So there's going to be some money that has to go out the door in that case.
Mhm.
But that's the first name people will go to. And that's the one that is most obviously on the market because they had a meeting with him and told him that they don't have plans to extend him. They want to find him a spot where he can win.
Mhm.
That would help power play one in a big way. That would help line one in a big way. They've been searching for a left wing on that line. His playmaking, I think, is his calling card at this point. And they could use more playmakers. The questions, I think, are obvious. What assets do you need to give up to get this guy? And will he waive his no movement clause? And are you acquiring him as a pure rental or with the intent to potentially try to extend him? And if so, what does that cost you elsewhere on your roster? It's an interesting one.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would even be a conversation if they didn't have A, a competitive team right now, and B, a general manager who has a history with this player, but also seems to have a willingness, unlike his predecessor, to make the sell, right? And try to convince a guy that even if he has a clause, that it might be worth considering waiving it. Would they even be able to extend him, right? When this guy has
Yeah.
all his options and he's 34 years old and he's trying to win a cup, would they even be able to extend him? Maybe not. Could they convince him to hang out here for a few months? Maybe. And if that's the case, is it worth it for just a few months, considering the assets that it might cost to get him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Kekalina would do it. I think he would do it in concept. I think you nailed it with the assets. Would he give up the assets to do it? But I mean, I look at that line that Panarin plays on in New York, and you have Trocheck sitting there. Trocheck's also going to start popping up on trade boards just because of that memo. He's at a good cap number, and he would cost significantly more, I think, right now to get him just situationally. I mean, you're talking about a player that has 3 years left on his contract after the season with a cap hit of 5.625. An Olympic level talent. There's something there, but I get what you're saying. I think that the acquisition cost would be less at basically the same cap number that you're going to take on this season. Trocheck presents a different set of issues. Obviously, if you take that on, just given what you have to talk about with Tuck, Benson, Doan, etc., Kesselring. But he's a name that's sitting there. There's other names out there though too. I don't want to go too deep of a dive. I think it's low probability on Trocheck, but I think my point in mentioning him is that I think you're going to start to hear him come up more.
And he has a 12-team list. And to your point,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a different conversation if you're Trocheck because you're committing to a team for multiple
Right.
years. Whereas
Yep.
Panarin, you could sell him on a couple of months. All right, hey, come see what it's like. Help us end
Yep.
this drought. See what this city is like when we get to the playoffs, and then we'll talk, right? And see
Dude,
if it
if you're
makes sense.
Yarmo, you're kicking the tires on it, though. You're still kicking the tires. I
Oh
just
yeah,
think
of
it's low
course.
probability because of both sides, because of the acquisition cost and likely because of other opportunities that Trocheck would have if he wants to be open for business on getting out of New York,
Yeah, it's a name
if he
for
even wants
sure
to. Yeah.
to think about. And I think one that I mean, the Sabres are going to be in a position with all these guys that become available, the big
Mm-hmm.
names, the big asset trades, like even the Quinn Hughes trade. They're in a position that not a lot of teams are in because of the young talent that they have and because of the prospects they have and the picks they have. Like they have everything you need to make some of these deals. The only thing they don't have in a lot of cases, or at least in this case, is the ability yet to convince guys to sign on. I mean, your Trocheck, you're talking about not just this year, but 3 years after this one, and he's
Mm-hmm.
32, so you're sort of the rest of your career, potentially.
Mm-hmm. And
And
if you're the Sabres, you're giving up significant assets, and you don't know if your recruiting problem that you currently have is going to go away or not. It's going to be, so you need those young players that
right.
can contribute. You don't want to trade in my opinion, a Benson, an Oslin right now, because I mean, they're cost controlled assets that are going to be building blocks. And if you don't make the playoffs this year, everything just resets. You're still in the same spot you were league wide in terms of perception in the market and everything else. So
Yeah, there's a
it's
lot
tough.
riding on the end of the season in that regard, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jarmo Kekalainen defaulted to that answer in his opening press conference about not wanting to take shortcuts for the sake of just making the playoffs. I understand why he defaulted to that answer, and I understand the mindset in a lot of markets and in a lot of situations. In this one, though, I do think it's a little different. I think it's different to change, get the experience for your group, get the business boost and morale boost in your community, and then change the perception league wide. Like that's going to
I
make a
would
difference to how you do your job.
100%. I would go into Vegas mode and, give up your first round pick. And I was, that's what I would do, but I would rather do that, obviously, in a package. I would give that first round pick up in a package with some players to get a bigger piece here. With that said, because I don't want to just stay on like a Trocheck type of move, there's more realistic options.
Well, it's good too to discuss what you'd wanna move and what you wouldn't. That's probably
Mhm.
in some ways the more prudent conversation than the exact target because it narrows your sights on the type of target that
Yeah.
you can deal with. The 2026 first round pick is something that at this point you should probably be comfortable putting in play. The one that you should really be comfortable putting in play is the 2027 one because
Mhm.
that shows you, you know, you should have some confidence about what you can be next year, especially. But I'd put the 2026 one in play for the right piece. It looks like there's a chance, and I'm always hesitant to say for sure, but it does look like there's a chance some significant players could become available league wide. I mean, we saw Rasmus Anderson move over the weekend, which was
Mhm.
a big. I mean, people always complain about lack of movement in the NHL, but like Quinn Hughes was just traded earlier this year. Rasmus Anderson's been traded. Like, there's been some pretty big movement. If Robert Thomas becomes available
Mhm.
and you have a chance to acquire that player, like you're absolutely throwing your first round pick onto the
Yeah.
table and other important pieces along with it because that's a game changing talent in the middle of your lineup. What I'm
Mhm.
gonna what I think would find like I'm gonna be interested to see what pieces Kekalainen is willing to put in play because his comment about viewing talent a little bit differently and thinking about the competitiveness and the
Mhm.
character piece. I mean, right or wrong, that comment will be remembered when it comes time for him to make his first move, right? And
Mhm.
the players that go out the door. Now, it may be a case where if it's a big enough trade, certain players had to be put in play, even if Kekalainen really liked them. But it could also be that we get an idea of who he believes in and who he doesn't. And he's going to have to be mindful of not disrupting what they've got going on in the room right now and the good feeling that this winning run has been generating in the locker room. And that's where, I wonder which guys would disrupt that if you're to pull them out. And, we've talked about Jack Quinn, putting that piece in play like the way Vancouver did with some of those young players who maybe were change of scenery candidates, guys that needed to, hadn't quite materialized in the NHL. We've talked about power before. Like, I'm not putting Byram in play right now. One, because of how he's playing, and two, because of what he means in the room. And I'm probably not putting power in play right now because of the way he's playing. And
It's not a deadline type of deal.
no, like I'm not in a rush to make the power Byram decision right now.
No.
So you're leaning on those top four. And I know Power got hurt at the end of last year, but he's been a pretty steady, durable guy for this team. Byram, is such an asset in the locker room. So you've got your top four that you're leaning on so heavily. You don't want to mess that up. And so you're really, I think, picking from that young pool of players.
Mhm.
And Quinn is probably the roster player that you're thinking could end up
Mhm.
in play. And I do wonder in a certain deal, and this is just spitballing. This is not like
Mhm.
me saying anything beyond, you know, kicking ideas around, but
Yeah, so that's a signal to anyone listening or watching. Don't hammer Matt for what he's about to say.
right. But I'm wondering about Norris.
Yeah,
And
Norris is yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if there's a lot of I don't know what the value would be just because of the injuries and stuff like that, but I only bring it up because Kekalainen he wasn't here when he was acquired.
Mhm.
And if you're going to acquire a big time center, it may necessitate,
Well, it
a little
necessitates
give
moving
to
out
get
that cap number too.
and the
I mean,
cap
let's
number.
face
Yeah.
it, it's more to me, it's about the cap.
Yeah, it's an $8 million or somewhere thereabout.
High 7s, yeah.
I mean, he's an awesome player when he's healthy and
Mhm.
another guy that was a really good addition to the room. So I think they would love to just have a healthy Norris, but to your point, the cap number is a big piece of that as well. When you're talking about the Robert Thomases of the world, or Trocheck, or you know different guys like this, it is there's going to need to be some money that goes out the door. Um, do they have what it takes to snag one of these big pieces? What do you make of the idea that Braden and Luke Shen might want to play together?
No, we
Could
talked
that
about that a couple shows ago. I
could that
mean,
solve both of the problems that the
no,
Sabres
it
have had?
does. I think it does from a cap perspective. I think it does from a leadership perspective, an experience perspective. Absolutely, it does. Is that the ideal move at either position? I would argue that the Shen one is exactly the type of move that you could make, because you're not going to need him to play if Timmins and Kesselring are good to go and you stay healthy and your present top four, your current top four, stay healthy. Shen would be ideal. Luke, that is. Braden can still play, but I don't think it's ideal. But put it this way, like, I look at some of the other names out there. First of all, it's going to cost, I think, a decent amount. Not as much, obviously, as Robert Thomas, but it's still going to cost a decent amount to get Braden Shen. But I think that's where you can get it done in a Quinn-based package with a pick, and you're not compromised. You can still act like a buyer. There's going to be people that are saying the Sabres should not be buyers. I'm saying, yes, they should be buyers, because you need to make the playoffs this year. You need to go into Vegas mode and just almost mortgage the future with picks. I mean, you have to make the playoffs if you're the Buffalo Sabres in this market. And it's not, look, I think it's going to be a significant acquisition cost. I mean, if you look at what the deal would have been if Toronto made the deal last year, it was like 2 really good prospects. And I forget the names, but I remember, based on Elliot Friedman's reporting, I mean, it was the kid that's in there right now that from London,
Owen, right? Or Cowan?
the Easton Cowan, and another one. I mean, it was significant.
Let me
So
look and see if I can find those names here.
I think that, it's a
Cowan,
significant.
Danford, and something else, possibly a pick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So,
so
Danford's a defenseman. Yeah, I mean, I think, and those were 2, pretty quality players.
well, Cowan's been, a great addition to their lineup
And
this year, and
and
not
I
something they
don't
really
know.
can give up.
And like, if you just flip a pick to get Luke Shen, if it helps you get Braden, I would do it.
I mean, Luke Shen, to me, he's not playing very well this year. Like, what's
It's
that
not
going to
about that.
cost you? A 4th or 5th round pick?
Yeah, and to me, it's not about that. And his cap hit is minimal. You're still gonna have to make a roster player in a deal to get the cap room, I think, to make it happen.
Probably.
You know what
Unless
I
they
mean?
eat a
Because you're
little
still
bit of
pressed
it.
up.
But
Yeah, I still think you're gonna be,
but it's only going to
up
cost
up against the
probably
number.
a 4th or 5th round pick, I
Yeah.
think. And to your point, all it does, he's not playing great for Winnipeg this year, but it's, him or Metza, right? Or him or
Mhm.
Bryson as that extra that can go into the lineup once in a while, block shots, be a net front presence, leadership in the dressing room. Like, this is a team that could use it. And to your point, if it could help them get Braden Shen, which would be a significant deal for them.
Mhm.
To your point, probably a couple of legitimate prospects. He's got 19 points this year. He's not, playing
Isn't he their
great.
captain? Is he their captain?
He's their captain, and he's got, he had 50 points last year. He's playing 16:37 a night, so he's still a big piece of their lineup, and brings a lot of what the Sabres could still use more of, right? That experience and that playing style. Be interesting to pair those two together. It wouldn't be the home run swing like a Robert Thomas or an Artemi Panarin or Trocheck, but it would be a significant deal for the Sabres, and he's got what has he got? 15 team no trade list, but I think to your point, if you get Luke, is that enough to that's got to be enough, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I would think.
I mean, I consider it. You have to look at the entire market. I mean, you got to go and talk to Calgary, see where they're at, and see where some of their players are at. Because even though he doesn't play center, I would go for a Blake Coleman all day.
Kadri is another one that
Kadri's out there as well. I was going to get to him, and then Columbus, depending on what they're going to do. I mean, for the same like experienced leadership type of thing, I know Boone Jenner's sitting there. Boone Jenner is currently playing wing right now in their lineup, and he's on their second power play, I believe. I don't think he's on their top unit, but he's there. A little bit longer in the tooth. Tread on the tire is a little thinner than it's been, but I think that he still accomplishes what I think he would give your room a boost, and he can certainly still play.
pending UFA, a Yarmo favorite
Mm-hmm.
from his days in Columbus. So definitely a name to watch, but you got to wait it out a little bit because you got to wait till Columbus is ready to sell, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he's their captain, correct? Like, so that's, they're still on the fringes of the race, and they actually just added not that long ago, right? And they made a coaching change, and so they're still trying to do things to squeeze some life out of this season, and trading your captain is a tough move. So that's definitely a name to watch though, because that is a guy that Yarmo loves, and he doesn't have a contract for next year yet. So where he would fit it would be interesting. Like, are you putting him on the fourth line at center? Are you using him on the wing and kind of giving him some of the Zucker minutes? It's that'd be an interesting puzzle piece to have in your lineup. Probably not costing you a first rounder, I wouldn't think, right?
No,
Probably, you
no,
know, maybe a
no.
prospect, a second rounder, something in that range. But an interesting name to keep an eye on for sure. And I think it's a good call out on Calgary that um, they've got some names that would be appealing. Stamkos is another name that may end up shaking loose in Nashville. Would be a power play help, would be a leadership boost for sure.
He's heating up. He's been heating
He's
up with
from
the goals.
outside of Toronto, so perhaps there would be a sell there on Buffalo. But all this said, there's definitely I'm in the camp with you that they should be a buyer. Like, they have hit a point, unless the bottom falls out between now and the Olympic break, because I'm looking at the Olympic break as
Mini season.
the mini season, but I'm also looking at that as, if you're in contention at the Olympic break, you're a buyer.
Yeah, and
There's
after
not
that
that many
stretch too,
games.
it's a quality stretch. It's not like you're playing a bunch of,
Right.
bottom tier teams. I mean, if you emerge, if you're in whatever when they go to break, what first week of February, and you're in that spot still that you're in today, or even somehow higher than you're in the final wild card spot right now if you're the Sabres. And no, there are, I know, like, you can't broad stroke the fan base. That's always dangerous, right? But I know that there are some that says if you're in the final wild card spot, you're not a buyer. Like, the buyer should be the real contenders. Number one, not if you're the Buffalo Sabres when you desperately need to make the playoffs as an organization. And number two, all you got to do is get in the East. All you've got to do is make the playoffs, and you are a contender.
Yeah, Paul Maurice said it when they were in town last week. It could be wide open in the East, potentially. There's no guarantee that Florida gets in. They probably will, but there's no guarantee of that. And if they're out, you look at the way they played against Carolina yesterday, and
That's exactly where I'm going.
it's going to
Yes,
be different in a playoff series, but it didn't look like they were completely overmatched. And Tampa is a real threat. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think they're the favorite in the East, but they've played a lot of hockey over the last,
Mhm.
5+ years. Like, them holding up and staying healthy and all that, like, at the very least, winning a round is on the table, and then after that, who the hell knows, depending on how things happen, you know? And so, yeah, get in, and what that would do for so many different facets of the organization, from business to morale in the community to experience in the locker room to your perception league wide. I mean, there's been obviously a lot of talk about Sean McDermott in the last couple days, him getting let go as the Bills coach. If he did not get in 2017, like, a lot would have been different for this
Mhm.
team as far as establishing, this. You see all these former players and even current players coming out and talking about the culture that they built and guys wanting to go play. Like, Sean McDermott is a big part of that. And you establish that when you get in year one, and when those players feel what it felt like to end that drought, what it felt like in the community, and then that bought them time to have a bit of a down year in 2018 and Josh Allen's rookie year. It bought them credibility. It bought them all these different things that matter, different sport, but I think there's a parallel there to what it could mean. And again, I get Kekalainen's why he said what he said, because you're not maybe going full Vegas mode just yet. But I do think you look at the East and where it is this year. You can't guarantee it's going to be that way every year, because Florida will get healthy again next year. And, maybe Carolina uses that cap space to make a huge ad. And, you know, you just don't know. It feels like it's going to be as wide open as it could possibly be. And when I look at the schedule, when you come out of the Olympic break, you have 5 games before the trade deadline. So that's why I say the Olympic break to me is decision time. And you have 6 games left in January and then 3 in February. So 9 games before the Olympic break. You could fall out of it in those 9 games if it goes really bad. But
Mhm.
I'd be looking. I mean, look, Kiefer Sherwood got dealt. Rasmus Anderson got dealt. Like, the deals are starting to happen, and I think they've reached a point where it's hard for me to envision them being anything but in a buying position, because I think even if you go 5-4 in the next 9 games, you're still going to be within a couple points of that spot potentially. And that's even if you're not sitting in that final wild card spot. If you're within striking distance, I think you have to do it. And I think part of what followed Kevin Adams is that deadline where the only addition they made was Jordan Greenway. And imagine how the story of his tenure would have been different if they pushed harder and he was able to push that team into the playoffs.
Matt, that's my point. Okay. Constantly trying to keep your team set up for the future. Obviously, you want to have a sustainable model of success when you're a general manager, but the future is now. After years of preserving the future, got to take some chances. And I just think the future is now for the organization. No, I think it's go time. And that's why I say the Norris thing is an official, like, critical concern for the team, because if you got to get him back. And if you don't, then you got to do something quickly. And it's wise right now to kind of sit back and be patient, because teams in the next couple of weeks may drop down, and that creates potentially a broader market. You don't have to be quick and itchy trigger finger and go and get Kiefer Sherwood. You don't have to have an itchy trigger finger and make some of these deals now and, like, jump on the first thing that
No, and
hits,
like,
because other things are going to shake loose here.
yeah, like Sherwood to me wasn't quite what they needed. I think it makes a lot of sense for San Jose to get an experienced guy and,
Mhm.
somebody that they can afford. They have so much cap space in the
Mhm.
summer that they can afford to give what might look like a reckless contract to Kiefer Sherwood, and it won't impact them too much. Like, that's not a big deal. I think that's a move that makes sense for San Jose that didn't really make sense for Buffalo, even though the cost to acquire wasn't all that big of a deal. Like the cost to acquire wouldn't have been the problem for Buffalo, but it's the what are you going to do after that? And is he the guy that fits what we're talking about as far as what they need? I think that one's fine. Rasmus Anderson, I would maybe put into that was a pretty steep acquisition cost for a guy that is
Mhm.
almost definitely a rental. I mean, he was not willing to sign an extension with any team, it sounds like. And once he gets to the summer, I don't know that he's hitching his wagon to Buffalo. I think, if he's not willing to sign an extension in Vegas, then it stands to reason he wants to test the open market. They're already paying a lot of defensemen. Don't get me wrong, Rasmus Anderson that would be a badass addition to this blue line and would have helped solve some of their minute distribution at the moment, but just not necessary. So I think it's a good point by you that waiting to see how this all shakes out. And, we're sitting here talking about the 9 games the Sabres have before the deadline, which is not nothing. Or before the break, I should say. It's not nothing, and for teams that are in worse position than the Sabres that have a similar amount of games, that could really cause some separation in between the buyers and the sellers. I think you're seeing a lot of sellers emerge in the West. Vancouver, I think we're reaching that time with Winnipeg, right? They're still pretty far down the standings. St. Louis, Chicago, Calgary, Nashville probably all fall into that. The Kraken may end up there in the next 9 games. It's really the East where you have the questions. We know New York is going to be one of those teams that's selling, thanks to Chris Drury's essay. Columbus could be. I don't know what to make of Ottawa and New Jersey, but they're teetering on the edge. Beyond that, I think you're going to have a lot of teams that think they still have a chance. And so you do want the market to be a little bit, but it's going to happen in a week and a half, right? As teams, because like I said, when you only have 5 games between the end of the Olympic break and the deadline, you kind of have to have your mind made up going into
Yeah,
the break.
I keep looking at the Norris situation. I guess I think you're gonna want to get a reinforcement there. It's a level of reinforcement that you go and get. Eh, That's what comes out of the Norris conversation. I think like if you're still not feeling good about him, that's the more quality asset, the more quality reinforcement you got to get. But the defense, if I'm picking one right now, I'm actually going to make a move on the blue line right now and kind of roll with my forwards, roll with my system, roll with the renewed forecheck, the suffocating style, and just get a guy that can provide some relief and maybe experience. And maybe it's a lower impact move in the grand scheme of things. And maybe it's that balance. Maybe you can kind of do both, preserve your future assets and just add a reinforcement at the experience reinforcement. Um,
There would be a trickle down effect there too, because you take a little pressure off the top 4 and preserve them a little
that's
bit,
what it all is.
and
That's what it's all
maybe
about
take
for
some
me.
pressure off of Kesselring to keep Russian back into the lineup. Like it would be, and to your point, the acquisition shouldn't be significant. Like the cost to acquire, even if it's a Shen, you know, somebody like that shouldn't be a big time ask. The other point I'll make, we haven't talked about Alex Tuck, and maybe we could touch on that briefly before. But the other point to me, in terms of being a buyer, and we've talked about this before, we talked about it when discussing why the move on Kevin Adams made a lot of sense, is that the deadline ends up being one of the big points on the calendar where you can impact your team now and in the future. Because whether it's a Robert Thomas or a Trocheck, but there's others that could be out there. Like there's deals you could make. The Sabres have made them before, right? They with the Norris trade, with the Byram trade. There's deals that can make you better now and position you for the future as well. So there's not a lot of times on the calendar where you can count on there being this much potential activity, and this is one of them. So it's a big opportunity and one that I think Kekalainen, will take advantage of. I think he, if there's one thing in his history that's clear, it's that he'll make trades and he'll make bold trades. as far as Tuck goes, I think people see the what Vegas is able to get for Anderson, and they wonder about Tuck. Like, I'm not touching Tuck at this point. Like, I think I'm pretty comfortable,
No.
not just because I think they should be a buyer, but I guess in part because I think they're a buyer, is that you're not removing that piece from your lineup. When you talk about the locker room and all that, I'd like to see Tuck step up in games like the game against Carolina a lot more than he did. But
It's one game.
it's one game.
He's also played pretty well in the past. I know you're only as good as yesterday's press clippings. So
But he's
Chuck didn't
played
have a
well.
great, but he's played well. He's
He's
played
been
well.
one of their most consistent forwards lately. That's just a game and a game style that I wanna see. That's a, you know, tight checking, kinda. I hate calling these playoff type games because it's January and the playoffs are so much different, but, a version of these meaningful late season game that, you're gonna but I'm not moving Tuck. I'm not even thinking about moving Tuck, and the 2 reasons why are, yeah, you're a buyer and you're not removing a player like that from your lineup or your locker room, but 2 is that I think making the playoffs changes the calculus on convincing him to sign if it's something you're still trying to do as an organization.
It's January 20th, and right now you have to approach, the task at hand as a buyer. But I'll tell you what, with that said, if you lose to Nashville, you lose to Montreal on Thursday, you lose to the Islanders on Saturday, you lay an egg the following Tuesday in Toronto, the whole buyer thing changes.
Oh,
It
yeah,
could change. Okay.
it's
So
over
again,
at
it's
that
it's
point. I
fluid.
mean,
It's fluid.
it's always fluid, and we would be having a much different conversation if they go on
Yes.
a it can
But
change. 9 games is a lot of games, and you can fall
that's
out
right.
of it, but if you're within a couple points at the break, I'm sticking with buyer.
But right now, yeah, that's exactly right. That's right. So my point is it's not locked in. It's not. Now, here's the thing though. You can take a swing right now and better your chances of beating Nashville, beating Montreal. Well, maybe not Nashville. That's tonight. Montreal, the Islanders. I mean, you
I
can
think
take those
you'd
swings,
have to trade for
you know?
Stamkos if,
Yeah, exactly.
a guy that's already in town, trade for
But
one
I
of
think people
Nashville
know what
players.
we're saying here. I mean, I do. I'm not looking at this how Kevin Adams has, where it was all about, not blocking the path for our young players and not, making sure it's sustainable in the future. Yeah, you're going to try to hold on to those cost controlled assets. But if you can move those future picks, high picks, there's always been a reluctance to do that here. You gotta throw them on the table if it
Well, and I
means
also
you
like
make something that helps you make the playoffs this year.
Kekalainen's got a decent track record of hitting after round 1 too. So, if you give up,
Mhm.
I think to your point on the young cost control players and these prospects, it's like it looks like to me Roseanne should be in play. He got passed over on this latest call up for Helenius, whatever we want to go
Call him
with.
Hellenius.
Not a Jarmo Kekalainen pick. Roseanne isn't. So, is he going to have a ton of value? Maybe not, but we both kind of liked the way he played earlier this year. But you're running out of, a lot of these guys have already been promoted, and, you're running out of spots for some of these guys anyway. So prospect wise, I think there's definitely room to move off some of those guys in the pool. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, they got like you said, Nashville, Montreal, Islanders, Toronto, and then it's back home for the Kings and the Canadians again before Florida, Tampa, and Pittsburgh. And that is your pre-Olympic break schedule. So you go 3-6 and you're sitting 5 points out, then we might be having a different conversation. While Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen head to Milan.
Yep. We will have that different conversation soon, regardless, because we have hit the end of our conversation today. We're over an hour in. It's approaching 7:30 here on Tuesday morning when we're recording this. And I actually have to get a move on, Matthew Fairburn. So let's do our plugs and get to some snow blowing duties.
Yeah, I forgot I still got a snowblow.
Yeah, I didn't. I've been looking at the clock.
Hopefully
I have to squeeze
maybe
it
the
in before I have
production
to make
crew
some calls. Yeah,
maybe the
right.
production crew got a head start for you, but
I didn't
people
hear
can
it. I didn't hear it.
people can go to theathletic.com. Go to theathletic.com/Buffalo because there's probably plenty to catch up on from my NFL colleagues on everything going on with that team this week. But there you can also find all of my work on the Sabres in what has been a busy stretch for them as well. And I'll be joining the team in Montreal for this road trip. So on our next episode, I may be coming to you from north of the border. So stay tuned for that. And of course, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel or wherever you find your podcasts. And especially like the video. Add your comments. Buy or sell. Where are you at as a fan? Let us know in the comments.
Bye. All right. And with that said, I will also say goodbye. You just heard Matthew follow all of his instructions there on his plug. So for Matthew Fairburn, for the production crew, I'm pretty sure hasn't done shit helping me get set up for my day. I'm Chris Baker. Thanks everyone for hopping in, making this show a part of your routine. Sabres got a few games coming up and we'll be back to talk about them very soon. Take care.